Well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another week of ArtSpeak University. My name is Ryan. I am on the team here at ArtSpeak, but I'm also a church creative, have been for many years now, and love gathering with all of you every week online to just talk about things, talk about what we're doing, talk about systems, which we're going to talk about today. But we've got Kirk here today, familiar face. Love having Kirk here. And yeah, we're so excited to chat today with whoever's listening about how to build systems for your creative or your communications team, church or not, that actually serve your team well, serve the people you work with well, and don't just get projects done. So we're excited to jump into that today and throughout. Today's going to be a conversation. Sometimes we do a presentation, like Kirk's done in the past, a great job leading us through particular points. But Kirk and I just want to have a conversation and want to ask each other what we've learned about systems and about being part of teams, and would love for your engagement throughout the ArtSpeak University today too. So before Kirk and I jump into today's conversation, just want to remind you that there is an ask button at the bottom right of your screen where you can throw questions our way. Today's going to kind of feel like that, like just asking a lot of questions, answering. And so we'd love to engage with you. So feel free to throw some questions our way towards the end. We'd love to ask or to answer some specific questions that you have about your situation or your team. But yeah, Kirk, man, welcome, man. I'm excited to chat with you today. The last few weeks, ArtSpeak University, we went through a season of Easter, right? And for some of us, we may still be coming down off of that. We hope that that was a great season for you and your team if you're watching. Obviously, a lot of preparation goes into planning for Easter and executing that well. But now we've kind of transitioned the last couple weeks into a theme around looking internally, looking at the teams that help make things happen, like Easter services and Easter promotions, and asking the question, how do we strengthen that team? How do we work better together as a team? How do we structure things? And today's conversation is going to be specifically around what are some systems that we've learned, that we've put in place at ArtSpeak, or that we put in place in past experiences. I've got some experience as a communications director myself at a church. What are some of those systems that we put in place that we have seen be healthy and effective? But also, I'd love to lean into your insight today too on how to build systems that don't just get projects done, but also value people. So that is today's conversation. Excited to hear from you. So let's start there. We love to talk about, I feel like, especially like in America, right? Like we love efficiency, and efficiency is good. And we know that to get things done on time with high quality results, we got to be efficient. We've got to have good systems. But I want to start today's conversation with, what is it about building a good system that not only serves projects well, but serves people well? What have you learned, and what has ArtSpeak kind of learned and done internally to build systems that serve people first?
Yeah, I think maybe this parallels a lot of people experience, but I've experienced this huge contrast in my life. When I was working at a credit card company, an unnamed credit card company, and they had nothing if not systems. Like you log in, everything is tracked down to the millionth of a second, and and you are accountable for all of those things. And so perhaps it's no surprise that every week there was an ambulance called to that office
Sure.
building.
Right.
So those are systems that did not have people in mind,
Yep.
neither the people working there nor the customers, let me tell you. So that's one version. And then I went from that to a church plant. We were starting a church. We had no systems. Well, that's not quite true, but there were lots of systems that we had to develop along the way, and that also is not great for the team or the people we were trying to serve without those systems in place to take care of things. And so the goal, though, if you have a foundation like we do of hey, this is about people, it's about people, you can create systems that make it healthy and ensure that it is. Because systems are about making decisions ahead of time so that you don't have to keep making those decisions. When you
Yeah.
decide what you want and this is what needs to happen, you can go ahead and make that decision. You don't have to expend energy making that decision every time. We've decided this.
That's
And
right.
that just removes the friction and brings the clarity that allows us to work together well if we set it up right.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I think one of Jason's favorite stories that I remember, and maybe we've shared on in past Arts University, because I think is relevant to this conversation. He has that phrase like "put wheels on it," right? Like, and that comes from was it the same
Yep.
church planting you're talking about? Great.
Hmm.
Share that story for anyone who's not heard that, and kind of the heart behind that idea of put wheels on it.
Well, we were a portable church, right? So that meant that every week we had to take all the stuff out of the. Eventually, we got a closet. We could store stuff on the premise. That wasn't always true, and so we had to pull all that out, set up our whole, our stage and mics and sound system and all of that. But one of the things that took the longest always was the drum set. The drum set was always the last to be assembled. It was always the last to be torn down at the end of the day. And somewhere along the way, someone was like, "What if we had these stage platforms? Like, what if we could put wheels under that, and then we just left the whole drum cage assembled?" And it took some work. So it took some clever people who were handy, and we made wheels to go on the bottom of this stage, and it was fantastic. Now all of a sudden, drums are done from the beginning. That was the first one done. And they could go around like, "Yeah, can I help you unroll that cable?" And so that made it easier for everyone, better for
Yeah.
everyone. Simple tweak.
It's so good, and I think what I love about that story too is this is funny, especially coming from a worship drummer, right? I've got some experience the past playing
Yeah.
drums in my church, right? And it's not this way; it just feels this way as a drummer. But you're like typically in the back. You're typically like the last person to like be considered for something. Like, is the lead singer's mic working well? Like, can we make sure we got the guitar? And so you just kind of feel like background noise. But my favorite thing about that story as a drummer is it's saying like, no, like you individual, in this case drummer, like we want to make your life easier, we want to systematize your part of this bigger picture. And when you can do that for individuals, and I think that's the thing, we often kind of lose the individual in systems, right? Like we're thinking globally, we're thinking organizationally, but a good system, an intentional system, often impacts one person, and in a really beautiful way, right? Like, and it helps provide some value, and some like gratitude for that individual. So we get that your role in this is essential, and it's important, and you may actually have the most difficult part of this. So let's drill down into your experience and build a system for you that works. So I also love that about that story, again, just being a drummer myself too. And then another phrase that I've heard very recently internally at ArtSpeak that I love, and I think it relates to this idea of how can we build systems for people and not just projects. But it's this idea that clarity is kindness. And I could probably vamp on that a bit, and maybe even I'll start there with kind of my experience. The hardest seasons for me in ministry, specifically church communications, is not knowing a lot of things, not knowing which direction I should go, what I should be focusing on, how I should go about requesting help that I need. And in those moments, in those seasons, I think it just felt, because I didn't know, it just felt like I couldn't move forward, and it just felt like I wasn't seen, and no one had providing clarity for me when I would ask. And sometimes I wouldn't ask. That's a two-way street there. But clarity being kindness, I also think is a great perspective for building systems for people. So can you speak more to that too? I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Well, I think there's if you have people who, if they're on your team and they're part, maybe if you're a part of a church or no matter what you're doing, there's a mission, there's something that you're trying to accomplish, and the people on your team want to accomplish that, but if they don't know how,
Hmm.
they don't know, what am I supposed to do? If is there a clear goal in mind? How do I know that I'm doing what I need to do? How do I know that I'm winning?
Yeah.
If that's fuzzy, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
That's that. In That's where that friction comes in. That's where you lose energy and you lose direction. So the more clear you can be, yeah, it's kindness. It's one to your point. Where do I go for help?
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to ask help? The clearer you can be, the more you just make things feel safe and calm. You reduce that stress that's involved in not knowing. I know as a creative, that's where I get stuck. When I'm most stressed, I'm trying to work on a project, but there is something about this project that is not clear.
Yep.
And so I feel like I'm guessing. I
Yeah.
feel like I don't know what you want. That's frustrating.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and then kind of one final thought on this systems that serve people. I love this thought. I was having a we recently wrote an article, ArtSpeak did, just talking about how to build and lead your church communications team. And one of my privileges was in helping assemble that article was I got to interview a bunch of people on the team, including you. But hey, just this is what I'm writing about. Just give me your thoughts and perspective. And I connected with Shelby, our director of operations here at ArtSpeak, and she had such a great thought on this point that I wanted to share today and represent because I think it's so beautiful. So kind of rewinding to my days as a church communication director, there were a lot of things that I did not. Um, being a young communications director, I stepped into it. Not a lot of systems in place. Being an Enneagram 1, being a type A person, I was like, I need systems just for my sanity. But what was interesting when I tried to roll those out, I remember initially facing a little bit of resistance from other ministry teams because it felt like I was putting a lot of like, hey, if you want this thing done, you've got to go here, submit this in a portal request, and it felt like I was over systematizing. And I wish I would have had this perspective from Shelby beforehand because I think I could have walked my teams better through that initial building stage if I did. But Shelby said that a request from a ministry team or a request from even your communications team those details of that request represent people. And what she meant by that was if your children's ministry or your youth ministry is asking for your help to execute X, Y, or Z from the communications team, the reason they're asking for help is because they're trying to reach, help, serve, or minister to a person in their ministry, right? And so a request is more than just like words on a page. When it comes to like creative ministry, it represents a story. It represents a person that we're really trying to connect with, serve well, and minister to. And so when we meet that request with a robust, clear, effective system, what we're communicating with those systems is we value this person's experience. We don't want this request. We don't want this detail to fall through the cracks. We don't want this person's story and experience with us and our church to be, they forgot about me. They dropped them. And so meeting a request with clear systems, we're not just putting up these things to be like unnecessarily like restrictive in what we can receive. It's really saying we want to build good systems so that people can continue to be valued, so that we don't miss the opportunities to serve them, so we don't drop the ball on including them in our story. And so I thought that was really beautiful. And I know for me, in times where I would just get like a full request list, I would only see the tasks as a communication director, and I wouldn't see the people behind the tasks, and I wouldn't see the stories behind those requests and why we're trying to serve them. So I just thought that was a beautiful perspective that I wanted to share to any other church communication directors that are hanging out on the call. Think about tasks more than that, but people and stories and individuals. I think that's really great.
That's great, Ryan. That's
Love it.
fantastic.
One of the other things we wanted to talk about on the call today was, okay, let's get specific. Like, what are some of those in your mind? And I've got some thoughts too, but what are those like must have systems for a communications or a creative team, for communication, for planning, calendaring, etc.? So we got a couple of those specifics we're going to share with you today, but what are some in your mind, Kirk, that you're like, hey, if you're going to be a part of a team, really consider this particular system?
Yeah, and honestly, this is the TLDR. Like, if you're a church creative, or and you're feeling that lack of systems, you feel, uh, if you're one that's getting requests at the last minute or late at night and things like that, this is the solution for those things. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to implement a few systems that make a big difference. And so, number one, I think every team needs a single channel for communication. And this is a problem we see a lot in teams at churches, where it could be a lot of places. You could get emails, you could get phone calls, you could get text messages, you could get sticky notes left on your desk, all kinds of channels of communication where different parts of the church, different leaders are asking for different things. Um, that's really hard to keep track of,
Yeah.
and so, and it's hard to get it all in one place where that leader knows that, oh, this leader now changed their mind and doesn't want to call it that, now it's called this. And so that makes a kind of a spaghetti mess. But if you have one channel, one place where all work communication happens. We use Slack. Slack has worked great for us.
Yep.
That's where our team can communicate. Gives you opportunities to have specific channels for different things. You can also have DMs. And that way we can keep these threads of communication about different subjects all in one place. The whole team can see it
Yep.
and keep up to date on what's going on there. And it means that here's where the human part comes in. Like, okay, it's, whenever you sign off for the day, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., whatever works for you, you sign off and you can close that app. You can come back to it tomorrow.
Totally.
And that allows you to set that expectation rather than, oh, here's that text message at 9 p.m. So I think that's one. Ryan, anything to add on that one? I mean, we've got more here, but
Yeah, it's kind of a joke that I always love making. I was about to say my favorite, but it's actually my least favorite. The joke is calling it my favorite. But my favorite submission type when I was a community, I used to call them office drive-bys, right? Like the pastor would be walking down the hall, knock on the door frame. I've got this idea. Here it is. And in their mind, request submitted, right? And I'm like, yo, I'm terrible. Like, I'm not like a good multitasker. So like, I'm not great at like taking notes and this. So I need a hard copy of things. So I remember having to have that conversation with a couple of my leaders, like, office drive-bys, I love like the relational, like let's connect relationally, no doubt. I need that with you guys. But that is not the best way to submit requests and to communicate with me. I'm just not going to do it well. So having an application or an online system placed with that's where the communication happens. Again, it builds that record. It helps kind of keep track. My brain has trouble keeping track of a lot of stuff too. So that's great. And even another example too, something I get used to even with joining the ArtSpeak team. And I love that we try to have these very clear, this is where we communicate between these hours. But like today, I mean, you and I were collaborating today. I forwarded you an email, right? And so I tagged you on the email thread, but I still went back to Slack and I said, hey, I just did this. I just tagged you in an email because Slack is really where our team specifically is. That's where we're the most. We're not really in email a ton, I feel like, as a team and as a company. So even if we're doing something over here, even bringing that back to like the Slack environment, I think is a good norm, a good rhythm and system. So yeah, that I love having that one place for communication. And again, talking about how it sets the boundaries of like, if you send me a Slack message after when I'm logged off, I'll get back to it tomorrow. But it allows me to, as a creative, as a person, just kind of say like, take a break from the communication, right? That it's going to be there. It'll be there when you get back. Feel free to log off. Feel free to be with your family and be present after the workday's done. So that's great. Yeah.
I mean, because a consistent principle here is you, as a system, you need systems that empower your team to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And take breaks.
Yeah.
So, that's part of the deal here.
I love it.
And so with that, I mean, that's single for team communication, single source, single place for that. But then you need a project management system.
Yes.
Slack is not that, by the way.
Correct.
In other words, you need some kind of system that allows you to say, here's a task, it's assigned to this person, and it's due by this date.
Yep.
There's lots out there. We use Asana. You can start in Asana for free, so it's an easy one to do. There is a bit of a learning curve. There are others that are simpler if your needs are simpler, but I'll just say we use Asana. We like it. Allows us to have projects. Within those projects, we have tasks. With those tasks, have an assignee and a due date.
Yeah.
And it's not real until it's in Asana. And that's the deal. So now you know, as a creative on a team or whatever your role is, to come in and say, these are my tasks. Mm-hmm. These are when they are due. This is when they are due. And that's clear now. That clarity is kindness, right?
Yeah.
And so the system is then, if it's not in Asana, well, it's not real yet. And that prevents the office drive-by and the confusion, like, we talked on such and such day, I thought that someone said you were going to do this, and
totally.
So
I love it. Yeah, and we would even say too, it's a plus if you can find a system that has some sort of like built-in form or request portal. I remember when I was church communications director, I kind of piecemealed from a couple different systems. Like, here's where you go to submit a request, and then it kind of populates over here. One of the things we love about Asana is that we can use that it has the ability to build forms within it, and we can send links to people, say, hey, if you just go to this form link, it's going to automatically populate your request into Asana. And so that's a plus too if you're thinking about which system to pick and choose. Definitely pick one that can handle tasks and multiple layers of tasks well, which Asana can. But one of the things we love about it too is, again, just that outward facing, go here, fill this form out, and it will automatically pull that into our project management system. So that's a big plus there too.
Which is, if you're a church communications department, then you need a
Yes.
funnel. You need a place where people know this is where I go to submit a request,
Mm-hmm.
so that an online form works great for this. Again, you can hook it straight up to Asana, and allows you to funnel those tasks in where they don't get missed. They get logged, and you can process them from there and decide who's going to do what and when is it going to be due. Um, and you can ask in those forms, this is all the information we need for this kind of request.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is just, again, you're making sure that the requests, and therefore the people behind those requests, that they're not getting missed. Um, and you can communicate within those forms. Hey, the turnaround for this kind of request is 2 weeks.
Yep.
So they know from the get go. Oh, next time I need to think about this sooner.
Yeah.
So that's one. A few other things that we do on this category. A meeting log. I don't care what you do in life. You probably have to do some meetings to do it. And you want those meetings to be effective. And one of the best tools we found for doing that is to have a meeting log. Not just an agenda, we don't use printed ones.
Yep.
It is a digital meeting log. We use just a simple Google Doc. But that allows us, if it's a standing meeting, like if there's a meeting you have every week or every other week or every month, or probably you need to keep some kind of record of what you talked about. Probably there are some action steps that you want to take after that. Probably there's some decisions that you need to make. Record that in the doc. It doesn't have to be like detailed meeting minutes. I mean, if you're into that, please, by all means, do the meeting minutes. But, have that log where you can say, this is what we decided. Mm-hmm. This is what we talked about. And this is what we said we would do from here. Now, you need to translate those into Asana or some other task system. But here's where this gets great is now there's a record of it. Yes. And so you walk away from that meeting in a few days like, wait, we talked about this. What did we just say that we were going to do? I don't remember, because this happens to me all the time. Secondly, if this is like a standing weekly meeting, and people know, hey, we're going to have this meeting again next Wednesday or whenever it is, and this is something I'd really like to see us talk about. Well, they can go ahead and go into that log and have a place for that. Hey, I'd like to talk about this in this meeting. And that way that's not forgotten about or lost by the time you get around to that meeting again. It's just a really effective tool for more effective meetings, and a log. So here's what we did. Here's what we talked about. And you can just scroll down the doc to see what happened 3 months ago.
So great. Yeah, the continuity between being able to see kind of the progress between meetings too, because that's sometimes what I run into is I can get a little zoomed in on like what we need to do this week, but like when you the ability to use a meeting log to like kind of zoom out to like the last few months, what have we been talking about? What have we been, 2 months ago we said we want to do this, have we done it? And so just having all of that in one place instead of maybe a doc per meeting to get really specific, having one doc that is always being added to, it's just the ability to look back and even track a little bit of progress and make sure that something we brought up a couple months ago or weeks ago isn't being forgotten about in the midst of new things, because there's always new things to do. So that's another great part about meeting documents that we love. And then one more I'd love to talk about, and then we can answer a couple questions from the chat here. And it was something new when I joined the ArtSpace team. Had never heard of this, but it's that bandwidth check-in message that we like to send individually at the beginning of each day in Slack. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, why you implemented that, and some of the upsides that you see to have that as part of your team system?
Yeah, so this goes back to kind of how we use Slack, which we could probably talk further about. But we have a status channel, which is, I think, one of the default Slack channels, or maybe it was originally general. I don't know. But the idea is every day we'll check in and post in that channel, hey, I'm checking in. These are the things that I'm working on today. And here's my bandwidth. Now, for us, we've just landed on this is how we do it. A 0 to 10 system. 10 meaning I am full. I don't think I can take on anything else today. To 0 being, please, someone give me something to do.
Sure.
And this is subjective. It's not like there's some kind of objective measurement of how busy this person is. So uh, but subjective is important. We are subjects, not objects, and that gives us a chance to communicate about our bandwidth. And sometimes someone will come in and say, "I'm at 12,"
Yeah.
and that's my cue as a leader to come in and say, "Whoa, what's going on? How can we help?" You know, um, or if someone, we hope to get, are they around 7 or 8? So yeah, we've got plenty of work to do, but yeah, if you need help with something else, I can take something on.
Yeah.
This just gives us some language so we can kind of get a bird's eye view on, hey, who needs some more work to do, who has too much, and how can we help shift things around if necessary.
Yeah. That's great. And even one of the things that I learned about that system too in joining the Arts Week team that I love is that it's communicated too that that number isn't always just the number of tasks you have to do today, but maybe your day's busy. Like we're human beings. We've got things we need to do as a family. Like maybe I've got an appointment today. Or maybe like I felt this way last week, just in a moment of vulnerability. I was like, dude, I just don't feel like I have the creative capacity to like output a ton today. So I came in, and if I was just relying on like my task list for the day, it'd probably be like a 5 or 6. But just as like a creative and a person, I was like, I'm just maxed today. I don't know if I can like flex creatively today, regardless of my task list. And so the ability to even use that check-in and that bandwidth number that is more than just purely task list, but like how is the human being doing today and how is the creative doing today when it comes to what they can do. That's super great too. And again, just goes back to the idea of building a system that tries to put that person at the center of it and say, this is really here to serve you well, creative, to serve you well, Ryan, and we want you to view it that way and use it that way. So one of my favorite kind of subtle things about that particular bandwidth system too. But that's great. We've got a couple questions here from the chat that I'd love to chat about before we depart today. The first one is, what credit card shouldn't be in our wallet? I'm kidding, right? We're not going to slam any companies on here, even though it's MasterCard. Actually, I have no idea. Don't take that. But we're not going to slam anyone. But if you want to connect with Kirk, he'll tell you. He probably won't. He's too nice. He's such a great guy. He's not going to slam anyone. But that's a funny question. I love that one. But the first one that I do want to chat about is, how can you kindly direct away from the office drive-by type of requests?
Yeah. Now, Ryan, I think you've probably had more experience. I
Yes.
might be guilty of the drive-by
Sure.
request more than you are. So teach us, Ryan.
Yeah, I'd love to. So it's actually a conversation that Jason and Andrew were having last week that I think is super effective for this. If you missed last week, one of the things that they talked about was, we talk about the communication triangle all the time as a company. It's how we do our messaging, it's how we do our branding, but it's also a great framework for just interpersonal and team communication. And without going through what the communication triangle is too much, what I would say for that is, if you have a leader that is consistently doing the office drive-bys, and it is genuinely a request system for you that will not work, I can't do it, I think the way to do it is just to be honest with that person and say, I want to help you. Again, if you take that perspective of, your request isn't just another thing for me to do as a communications director, it's a way for you to help serve people. I believe that. I want you to hear that. But I cannot help you to the best of my ability, like I want to, if the way that requests get to me are these informal requests with no record. If you want my help to the best of the ability, please, here's a system that I built that I've worked hard to make clear and as low bar as possible. We're not trying to make like these super complex systems, right? That shouldn't be a goal necessarily if you're doing that for a team. But if you can just have that conversation, you can say, I want to help you genuinely. The best way for me to help you is to do it this way, is to get it in front of my eyes, get it on my task list this way. And if that's confusing for you, I've had to do this a couple times too. Specifically, like some older teammates that have been doing ministry for decades, right? And they come in, they've got this young communications director that wants them to go to asana.com. What is that? And sit down with them and say, hey, like, I'll carve some time out. Like, this is meaningful enough and important enough for us to do this together well. I'll carve some time out and train you and say, here's quickly how you can do it. And then honestly, the last bit, like the secret sauce that I found, and I found it out too late, but then ask for feedback on the system. Don't just assume that like it's the best way to do it, because you kind of built that in your communications director like desk, right? And this is how I would do it but is this actually serving the teammate well? Is there something I don't see when I built a system that we can do to improve? And so just involving them to that degree, I think you'll be surprised at how much better you'll get buy-in from the leaders if you kind of approach it that way.
Yeah, that's great, Ryan.
Love it. Let's try to hit one more. We're right at time, but we do have one more. I think that's great if we can spend a couple minutes on it. How do you use systems to prioritize projects when there are lots of ideas?
Lots of ideas. At Heartspeak Creative, I think we've often been plagued by lots of ideas.
Yes.
One of the things I'm learning right now in some books I'm reading it describes the process of work as you start by wondering about something, asking some big questions, then having some ideas to solve them. These are the phases. And then you got to make some decisions. You have to have some discernment, decide which of these ideas you're going to roll with. And then you got to get people excited about it. You got to enable people to do it, and then you got to make sure that it gets all the way to the done. So six phases. That's from 6 types of working genius.
Nice.
You can read about that.
Yes.
You have to be able to prioritize because often there's more ideas than there are resources. And that's a challenge of all kinds of leadership, is that resources are always scarce and you always have to make the call. How do you? Well, if you have priorities determined for your organization as a whole, if you've said, this is our mission, this is our vision, if you've said maybe this year, this is our focus, if you've decided, if we're talking about a church communications team, if we decided, hey, there are some tiers here that we're just going to establish our priority, like that maybe there are 3 events per year. We're saying these are top level events. They trump everything else. And then these are key ministries and they're important. And then there's some other ones that, they're going to have to fit in the slots in between the priorities of the others. If you can have some of these decisions made ahead of time, then that gives you some framework to work with here.
That's so great. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on that too, the biggest thing that helps you prioritize well is getting ahead. It's very difficult to prioritize if you get a lot of requests in at the same time, and it's very hard to handle this well and then make sure like the team members you're working with feel heard and feel valued. But if you as the leader of your team and the communications lead, the more time you can get ahead on requests, what's coming up in the next couple months, what's coming up in the next couple quarters, the more time you have, the more space you have to figure out priority long term on that long tail, right? It's prioritizing gets hard when it's in crunch time. So that's another thing just to think about. Get ahead on the request, be proactive and kind of even asking about what you need instead of waiting for people to send stuff to you in order to prioritize. So just last thing there. But yeah, we are out of time. These universities feel like they fly by. Maybe, hopefully for the audience, definitely for us talking, because I feel like I could talk to you for hours. But thanks for tuning in today, everyone. And just some quick reminders again at the end. ArtSpeak University is something we're doing every week. We like to have these conversations and to invite you in. But if you are not yet a part of the actual online community that is the ArtSpeak Creative community, we encourage you to check that out. Go to community.artspeakcreative.com. And join that online community. We're sharing resources there all the time. We're collaborating together. It's going to get you access to a Slack environment that you get kind of direct access to us and our team. Drop your ideas in. We just love to, instead of just talk at you, once a week, we love to be able to collaborate with you and to help you with your project. So if you've not checked out the community yet, please do that today. And we will see you again next week, same time for ArtSpeak University. We'll see y'all. Have a great day.